Today, we're diving into the life of a truly remarkable figure from 19th century Italy. He was a man who looked at a social crisis, at a generation of kids being lost, and decided to do something absolutely extraordinary about it. This is the story of St. John Bosco, or, as he's much better known, Don Bosco.
So, let's start with a really big question. Just imagine, for a second, a city totally flooded with poor, abandoned kids who have no direction, no family, no future. That was the reality in Turin, Italy, during the Industrial Revolution. I mean, where do you even begin to tackle a problem that huge?
Well, it turns out the answer came from one man, a priest with a pretty radical vision for education, a deep, deep sense of compassion. And that man was Don Bosco. So let's get into his core mission, which was really about becoming a shepherd for these lost boys. He created a system that was about so much more than just food and shelter. It was about restoring their dignity and actually giving them a real purpose in life. Okay, so who was this guy? To really get his mission, you've got to go back to where he came from. And his journey, let me tell you, it didn't start with any kind of privilege. It started with some really profound hardship. John Bosco was born into a poor farming family, and tragedy hit him right at the start. His father died when he was only 2 years old. This left his mother to raise 3 boys all by herself in incredibly difficult times. You can imagine how an experience like that, of loss and poverty, would shape your entire view of the world. You know, a huge influence on him was his mother, Margherita. Now, she was uneducated, but the education she gave him was something else entirely. She taught him about faith, about seeing the wonder of God in nature, and, this is so crucial, about charity. She taught him to help the poor, even when they barely had anything themselves. These lessons, they became the absolute bedrock of everything he would do later in life. So here's a quick flyover of his life. He was born in 1815. Then, in 1841, he was ordained as a priest right in the middle of industrial Turin, which was ground zero for the problems he wanted to solve. By 1854, his work had just exploded, and he founded the Salesian Society to carry on his mission. He passed away in 1888, leaving behind an absolutely incredible legacy. I love this quote because it's so revealing, right? From the very beginning of his priesthood, Don Bosco knew exactly what his purpose was. He prayed for the gift of efficacy of speech, basically, the power to really truly connect with people and have his words make a difference. And as history shows, yeah, I think he got it. And that gift for communication, it was at the heart of his next big idea. See, he didn't just want to offer charity, he wanted to build a whole new educational philosophy. He called it the preventative system, but the inspiration for it came from a really simple but powerful metaphor. This quote from St. Francis de Sales was the guiding principle for literally everything Don Bosco did. You have to remember, at the time, education, especially for poor kids, was often brutal and punishing. He chose a completely different path, one based on winning people over, not forcing them into submission. This was his core idea, and it was nothing short of revolutionary. The standard approach back then was to wait for a kid to mess up and then punish them harshly. His preventative system was the total opposite. It was about creating an environment so full of positive guidance, fun activities, and genuine affection that the desire to do wrong was basically prevented from ever taking root in the first place. So, the big question is, how did he do it? Well, he built his entire system on these 3 pillars. First, reason. He explained the rules. He made them understandable. He wasn't just demanding blind obedience. Second, religion, which provided a moral and spiritual compass for the boys. And maybe the most important of all, kindness. He showed genuine love and affection, which he believed was the only way to really earn a child's trust. And the million-dollar question, did it work? Oh, yeah, absolutely. The results of his method, combined with his frankly unbelievable work ethic, they just speak for themselves. He created a legacy that has lasted for over a century. So his first big project, the oratory, it started small, but it quickly grew to become a home for 150 boys. And this wasn't just a shelter. He set up practical workshops. He was teaching them real-world trades, shoemaking, tailoring, skills that would let them build a real future for themselves and finally break that cycle of poverty. So how on earth did he manage to do all this? Well, it was with an almost superhuman level of dedication. For years, it's reported he survived on just 5 hours of sleep a night.
That is a staggering level of personal sacrifice, and it's what fueled his entire mission.
And you better believe he didn't waste a single moment of those waking hours. While his boys were asleep, he was working, writing countless letters, authoring books on everything from math to history, creating little monthly pamphlets to spread faith and morals. And on top of all that, he was a super popular preacher and confessor. The man just never, ever stopped.
But his impact wasn't just measured in workshops and books. For a lot of people who saw his work up close, it felt miraculous. Stories of healings, of strange and unexplainable events, followed him throughout his ministry. It really added another whole layer to his legendary status.
One of the most stunning accounts is about a blind girl named Maria Stardero, and the description of her eyes is just so vivid. They resembled white marbles with no corneas. But according to a well-documented account, she was completely healed at his church. It's stories like this that just solidified the belief among people that this was a man of profound holiness. So you put it all together, the practical skills, the relentless work, the deep faith, and what you get is his ultimate legacy. He founded the Salesians, an order that continues his work with young people all over the world to this day. And it's no surprise he's the patron saint of apprentices and publishers, a perfect reflection of his life's work.
And that really brings us to our final thought. Over 150 years later, young people are still facing immense challenges. So it's worth asking, right? In our complex modern world, what can we still learn from a method that was built on three simple things: reason, faith, and kindness?